Hi, this is Allison Sheridan, and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. We first taught you about the wonderful app Notability from Notability.com back in 2016. We've done a few update videos along the way, but the capability of Notability has become so much more over the years, it's time for a bottoms-up tutorial. In fact, it's so capable, we're going to break this up into 2 tutorials. For purely text-based notes, or even notes and images, there are a lot of choices of apps to satisfy that need. Notability really shines when you want to use every form of information to record your thoughts, from handwriting to drawing to typing to even audio recording. At the end of this tutorial, I'll give you some examples of why I reach for Notability that I hope will tickle your imagination for what you can do with it. Notability is available for iPad, iPhone, and Mac. I'll be demonstrating primarily from the iPad where it really shines, and I'll be using an Apple Pencil, but it's not required. On iPad, you can use your finger, and of course, on iPhone, you'll be using your finger, and on the Mac, for some of this, you may even use your trackpad. You'll want to download Notability from the various app stores for your devices, but let's take a look at notability.com/pricing to understand the cost. I'll scroll down to show a comparison chart of Notability Starter versus Notability Plus. Notability Starter is free and has a lot of capability. Notability Plus is just $14.99 US per year, or they offer a monthly subscription if you just have an occasional need. A great deal of what I'll be teaching is available in the free version of Notability, and you may want to refer back to this chart when you hear about the various features. I have Notability open on my iPad Pro, and before we dig in, I want to show you how to get to the pricing because it's a little bit confusing. In the upper left, I'll tap on the gear, and with subscription selected on the left, you can see that I have a Plus subscription. If you select Manage Subscriptions, it will open to the Mac App Store, but I already have it open. Let me switch to it, and you can see the available plans. You can see the $4.99 per month price and a 3-month subscription for $9.99. But you also see 3 annual subscriptions, one of which is more than the others. I asked the folks at Notability about this, and they said the last 2 are a mistake, and they told me they'll fix it in the App Store. Rest assured that it's $14.99 per year for Notability on all of your devices. When we first open Notability, we have a sidebar on the left that shows Notes and Gallery, followed by Subjects. We'll get into that later. Above that, we have a search box, and we've seen the gear to get into Settings. Now, we don't have any notes yet, so it says 0 notes. On the right is where we'll be able to see all of our notes. We have 4 options to view: All Notes, Recent, Favorites, and Unfiled. In the top right, we're invited to create a new note. I'll tap New, and we get a blank page with a toolbar and a few buttons across the bottom. Before we get started, the first thing I like to do is to pull down with 2 fingers on the iPad, and this will reveal the title for our note. By default, it simply says Note followed by the date. You can change this format in Settings to also include the time you created it, or include neither the time nor the date. I'll double tap on the text, and I'll change the word Note to say Demo 1. I have an attached keyboard, so you won't have to watch me type on the on-screen keyboard during this tutorial. The row of buttons across the bottom are useful when you're starting a new note, but as soon as I select one of them, like say Rule, it changes the template to lined paper, but then all of those options disappear and those buttons never come back. However, we can get to the same functionality by going to the 3-dot menu in the upper right. I'll select Template Settings, and this opens up a vast array of options. Let's focus right now on the basic templates. You can see the default was plain white paper, but we have Rule selected. We can select Grid, and how about this light bluish gray? And then select Apply in the upper right. Well, we might like this, but what if that grid is too big? We can go back into Template Settings, and on the grid, you can see 3 vertical dots in the bottom right of the little grid. This allows us to tighten or widen the spacing. I'll bring it down to 1 and tap Apply. Now it looks like classic quadrille size paper. Let's go into the template settings again. If we like this template and we wanted to use it again, we can hit the star to make it a favorite. To the right of the basic templates, you can see 2 icons. It's showing us that we're in portrait mode right now, but we could also have landscape paper. Let's go back to portrait. Above the basic templates, we have a drop-down that says Letter Optimized. This is probably on letter because I'm in the United States, but I can change it to legal, tabloid, or any of the A sizes used in other parts of the world. I'll leave it at letter optimized. If I tap on the question mark, I can see that optimized paper sizes adjust the text size on text-only notes for optimal viewing across devices. That could be really useful if you're using it on a smaller device like an iPhone. At the bottom of the screen, we have two buttons: templates that we're viewing now, and My Templates shown with a heart. When I select My Templates, we can see our favorite grid blue letter portrait. If I press and hold on it, I get the option to set it as my default. I'll tap away. And if I tap the star, the gray-blue grid disappears and we're just left with custom templates. We'll talk about templates later, but when I hit the plus sign, you can see the option to import a template from files, several cloud services, or even scan a document. I'll tap away and go back to templates. Dot and rule controls for spacing work just like the grid spacing, so we don't need to repeat that. I'll change it back to plain white paper and tap apply. I'll tap the three-dot menu again to make that drop-down menu disappear. The toolbox is where we'll focus next. If you tap and hold on the toolbox, you can move it to the right side, to the bottom, to the left side, or put it back at the top of the screen. Let's go through how the tools work, starting with the pen. When I select the pen, you can see the color, and it's also underlined to show you that it's selected. I can draw a squiggle here on the screen with the pen. If I tap the pen again, I get a palette of colors. Let's pick a different color. And when I scribble on the screen this time, the palette of the colors stays up. What if I don't see the color I want? If I tap the color I selected again, I get a grid of colors to choose from. You can also see dots below the colors indicating that there are more from which to choose. When I get to the third page of colors, we see a plus sign. This lets me create any color I want with a gradient grid, a color slider, an eyedropper, or I can even type in the hex code for the color I want. Let's tap out of that by tapping on the four colored circles in the upper right. We can also get to these detailed color options by tapping on the color wheel. I'll tap out again, and when I tap the pen again, the color palette goes away. If I tap the pen again, I can scroll the color palette over to see three different circle sizes. If I select a different thickness and draw, as expected, the line thickness has changed. Now you might think just 3 thicknesses isn't enough options, but it turns out you can change them. If I tap on the selected thickness again, now I get a slider to change it. Let's take it to the max of 12. You don't have to obey any ordering here. It doesn't have to be small, medium, and large. They can be any size you like. Leaving my pen at size 12, I'll tap the circle to make the slider go away. The last control in this palette is the style of the line. The default is the one that responds to pressure sensitivity of Apple Pencil. I'll draw, but I'll press really hard to make it thicker. I can choose the top style, and it will stay the same thickness no matter how I draw. Let's choose a thinner circle, and then I'll select the dashed line style. And then you can see the dotted line style. But let's go back to a more reasonable line thickness and go back to the consistent line thickness style. I want to scroll the page so I can get to some free space. I have a couple of options. On iPad, since my pencil is set to draw and not my finger, I could use 1 or 2 fingers to scroll the screen. But I try to get in the habit of always using 2 fingers to scroll because on the iPhone, 1 finger will actually draw on the screen. I find myself constantly drawing on the screen with 1 finger when I forget. Another option to scroll would be to tap on the little finger point, and then you're sure you don't have a tool selected. I'll select the pen again. And we've been drawing freehand so far, which is great for doing quick and dirty drawings to annotate your notes. But sometimes you want real geometric shapes. Like in other apps, such as Apple Notes, I can draw an approximation of a straight line, and if I hold when I get to the end, it will turn into a true straight line as a vector. And let me do that again, but without letting go. After it's a straight line, I can move the end around to change the angle. Unlike many other mixed format note-taking apps, if I tap the line with my finger, since it's a vector, it reveals endpoints and a menu of options. I can tap and drag the line around with my finger, or if I tap and hold on an endpoint, I can drag it around, changing the length and angle of the line. Most apps can't do that. If I select Style, I can change the stroke thickness as before in the toolbox. And I can change the style of the line. Notice that the pressure-sensitive line option is grayed out. That's because it can't create geometric shapes. If I tap the line again, I get my menu again. The next options are pretty obvious: duplicate, cut, copy, and then delete down at the end. You'll also notice an option to save, and we may get back to that when we talk about stickers. Things are getting messy here, so before we go much further, let's look at the eraser options. When I tap twice on the eraser, you can see the same size options as I had with lines, but also options for whole or partial. Let's start with whole. I can tap on one of these geometric lines, and the entire line disappears without having to rub the eraser over it. If I switch to partial, on a geometric figure like one of these lines, I can split the line. And now if I tap on one of the remaining pieces, you can see that they're each real geometric lines. We can erase part of a freeform line, of course. So let's scroll back up. And then let's switch back to whole, and you can see I can tap anywhere on one of the dotted or dashed lines and they disappear entirely too. Let's erase everything on the page. We can draw more shapes. Let's see if I can get close to a rectangle, being careful to stop and hold when I come to closing it. If I'm successful, I can now drag any corner and change the size and aspect ratio of the rectangle. I'll select Delete. If I get close to drawing a circle, I get a true vector circle, and I can grab any of the dots to change the size, and I can tap in the middle and drag it around. However, I can't change the aspect ratio. Let's delete the circle, and this time I'll draw an oval. Now I can drag the dots to change the aspect ratio. We see the same pop-up menu as before, but if we select Style on a closed object, we have an additional option of Fill. I can select a color, and now our oval has a color fill. If I want to remove the fill, I can choose the transparent icon with the gray and white checkerboard. Okay, let's really challenge my drawing skills and see if I can draw a star. It's not perfect, but Notability still accepted it. That's because to Notability, it's not actually a star at all. It's just an enclosed object made up of some lines. Watch, I can tap and hold on any one of the dots and move it to any old place. You can create any enclosed shape you want by making straight lines and connecting them at the end. Now let's see what happens if we use the partial eraser and remove just part of one of the lines of our mutated star. When I tap on the object, now I only get 4 corner points. I can move the object around and change the size by tapping and holding on the dots, but I can't change the aspect ratio and I can't change the lines. Let's delete our poor mutant object. And one more object is really useful. If I draw a straight-ish line, and then I draw an arrowhead on the end, it turns into a nice vector arrow. Now, it doesn't matter how big or small you draw that arrowhead, it will be drawn appropriate for the thickness of the line. Let me change to a thicker line, and then I'll draw another one with an arrow, and now notice that the lines actually have rounded ends. I'll leave this mess here and hit the back arrow in the upper left to back out of our note. Now we can see our note under All Notes, Recents, and Unfiled. If I tap and hold on the note, I can tap on Favorite, and now it shows under the Favorites tab. I'll tap and hold on it again, and I'll delete our note. I'll create a new note. And we've spent a lot of time drawing to get you familiar with how the drawing tools work, but let's do some good old-fashioned text. The text icon is the double T. I can tap on screen anywhere, and it will give us a blinking cursor left justified from where I tapped. I'll type in some text for us to play with. I know that wasn't very exciting yet, but bear with me. The beauty of Notability is that it's mixed media. I can draw right near the text or even over the text with my pen, and they live in harmony. Oddly, Apple Notes doesn't let you do this. Text and drawings are compartmentalized into different areas. In the toolbox, we have a square icon for a selection tool. When I select that tool, you can see I have a choice of a boxed or freeform selection. I'll use box for now, and I'll drag around the drawing. Once that's selected, I can tap with my finger and drag on the selection area and move the drawing out of the way without ever disturbing the text. The selection tool will grab any lines where you've covered even a little part of it. Watch while I select over just part of the drawing, and then I touch and drag, and you can see that it selected only some of the drawing elements. This is why the freeform selection tool is often useful. I can grab just a little bit of the end of one of these lines and touch and drag, and I've been able to move just part of my drawing. Let's select the entire drawing and then delete it. I'll select the text tool again and triple tap our text to select it. Down below, we get easily recognizable text tools. I'll tap on the font, change it to Avenir, increase the font by tapping the up button a little bit, or I can tap on the number and scroll to a bigger size. I'll tap on the black circle, change it to pink, because why not, and then make it italics. Across on the far right of the formatting bar, you can see a heart with a little plus on it. When selected, this will save the format as you see it right now. Let me turn off italics, change it back to black, and then shrink the size back down. With it still selected, if I tap on that first favorited style, you'll see it go back to being pink and italics and huge. Now, I think it's a little bit of a bug that the format in the bar at the bottom doesn't reflect the change back to pink, italics, and huge, but if you tap away and then back into the text, it sorts itself out. You can create 3 font styles as favorites, and they will be available across all of your notes. However, these favorites don't sync across your devices. To remove a favorite, just press and hold on it, and you'll see the option to delete. The next few options are self-explanatory. Checkboxes, bulleted lists, numbered lists, indent, and outdent. The next icon looks like it might control justification, left, center, and right, but it actually allows you to change the line spacing. I'll use Command A on the Magic Keyboard to select all and delete the text. So far, I've been showing you text that's left justified and kind of constrained to the page, and that can be useful. But what if you want your text to be as free as your drawings? Let's take a look at the 3-dot menu down at the bottom. There's a toggle to enable quick text boxes. You have 2 choices on how to create them. The first option lets you use your pencil or finger to diagonally draw a text box, as long as the text tool is selected in the toolbox. Let's try that. As soon as I drag across the screen diagonally, I get a little floating text box where I can type. At the top of this floating text box, we have a grab handle where I can drag the box around. If I draw any geometric object, like let me grab the pen and draw a straight line, even at an angle. As I drag the text box around, you'll see guidelines show up so I can align the text box with the ends or center of the line. You may have noticed those guidelines earlier when I was moving geometric objects around. As you might expect, I can drag the corner points to resize the text box. I can even use the handle on the right to change the rotation of the text box. With the Painter's palette, we can change the background from plain to ruled to grid to dots. And we can also fill the background with color. The other icons give you copy, cut, duplicate, and delete. The 3-dot menu reveals Edit, which selects all of the text for an easier way to change the font. There's an option to disable text wrap, but it's actually not functioning in this version of Notability. We can also round the corners of our text box. I'll delete everything on screen. I was going to save this next one for the advanced show, but I can't wait to show it to you. If I tap the double T in the toolbox to get text, and then tap anywhere on screen, I can select the 3-dot menu again in the formatting bar. On quick text boxes, we also have the option to use Scribble. This is a feature best used with Apple Pencil, and make sure you have enabled it in Settings, Apple Pencil, Scribble. Now it turns out there's another way to add a text box rather than dragging across the screen. I can simply press and hold with my finger on the screen, and I get an option to add a text box. Since Scribble is already enabled, I can start writing in the box with my pencil, and it automatically starts converting my writing to text. You'll notice, as I'm writing, that you don't have to stay inside the box. It'll continue to recognize your handwriting. As soon as you pause, though, you have to start writing inside the box again. but you can color outside the lines as much as you like as long as you don't pause. I'll delete the text box. Scribble works in the normal text mode as well. Since I'm already in text mode and Scribble is enabled, if I tap on screen, I get a blinking cursor waiting for me to type. But I can handwrite anywhere on screen, and it will automatically be converted to text at that cursor point. There's another way to have Notability recognize text, and it doesn't use Scribble. If I switch back to the pen tool, I can handwrite some free-form text, like we were doing earlier, just scribbling on screen. If I use the selection tool to select the handwriting, and then I tap on the handwriting again, one of the options I get is Convert. I get two options, text and math. If I select text, I get a preview of converted text. At this point, I can choose a different language, or I can copy the text without converting by using the copy button in the bottom right. Or I can select Convert at the top right. And now you can see it has converted my plain old handwriting to text. To save you the agony of watching me write, I've entered some handwritten text into a note, and I've pasted some random text into a text box. While Notability's text conversion is quite impressive as you've seen, what if you don't want to convert the text, but you do want to search your handwritten and other text? If I tap the Content Manager, which is the double rectangle in the upper right, with the Pages tab selected, we can see the pages of the document. In the search box, I'll type in some words to search. Let's try find. And even though the D in find looks different in the 2 times I wrote it, it found both of them. I'll hit the X to erase my search. I'll type in example, and you can see as I start typing, you can see it find the word or part of the word. Now looking at the word out, that could be ONT, but it finds it correctly. The V in have is malformed, but it finds it anyway. Some is a little malformed too, but search still finds it. If I search for AND, it matches part of a word in my handwriting and the full word in the typed text. I can search for apple, and it finds it in both places. Even if search doesn't find every word the way you've written it, it can often decipher part of a word, and that will help you find what you need. Before we leave this sidebar, note that we can bookmark a page from here for easier reference. And if I tap on the 3-dot icon on any of the pages, I can add a page, cut, copy, or duplicate the page, create a template from a page, clear the entire page, or delete the page. At the bottom of the Pages column, there's an Expand button. And this allows you to see more of your pages at the same time. With the ability to have hand drawings, handwriting, and text in your notes, sometimes it's easier to find a page you want visually. We can still search from this view as well. I'll tap on the second page, and if I hit close in the upper right, or I use the contract arrows in the bottom right, I'm taken to the second page. At the bottom of the column, I have a Select button, and that allows me to select one or more pages. That gives me Copy and Duplicate buttons. We have yet another 3-dot menu, which allows me to select all on the selected pages, cut, bookmark, clear the pages, or delete the page or pages. I'll tap away, tap Done. Let me make sure our first page is selected, and then I can tap the Content Manager icon at the top right to close the pane. Back in our toolbox, we have a pencil, but it's pretty unremarkable with only color and thickness options. I'll use Undo to remove that scribble. The last of the basic tools in the toolbox is the highlighter. I'll select hot pink, because why not? I'll tap and drag across some words, and then I'll stop so it's a straight line. Since it's supposed to be a highlighter, of course it's transparent. I'll tap the highlighting with my finger. You can see it's a vector because I can select the endpoints and drag to cover more or fewer words. I can also select Style and change the line thickness to better match my text size. And if you're doing things other than highlighting text, you may want to play around with the line style and other colors. With the highlighter still selected, I can tap and drag to select more text to be highlighted, but this time I won't make my line straight. Turns out this one will not be a vector. I can't move it around or modify it like I can the straight line. Highlighting works very intelligently with text boxes. I'll highlight some of our text. I can use the handle at the top to drag the text box around, and the highlighting moves with the text box. But if I tap outside the text box to deselect it, I can tap on just the highlighting, and once it's selected, I can drag it around within the text box and even out of the text box to disassociate it from the box. That's some pretty tricky programming. In the upper right, we've been going to the three-dot menu to change template settings, but let me show you what else is in that menu. Share options let you choose the format for sharing. A note is a Notability native document someone can import into their version of Notability. And you can also export as PDF or image formats. Notability has a user-generated gallery that's filled with amazing templates, and you can add to that with Publish to Gallery. You can create a link so your recipient can view your note in a browser. It requests a login to Notability, and you can also stop sharing at any time. In View Settings, you have the seamless view that we've been seeing all along, and you can change that to single pages, where you swipe right to left. There's a night mode, and you may not have noticed, but the normal iPad OS status bar isn't there. We can toggle that on to see the time, date, state of charge, and Wi-Fi. I promised in the intro that I'd give you some examples of how I use Notability. I've imported some notes from my real Notability library, and I'd like to take you through just a few of them. This first one's silly, but when I first started watching Game of Thrones, I was trying to figure out Jon Snow's lineage, so I started scribbling in different colors in Notability. If I'd scribbled on paper, I wouldn't have had different colors, and I wouldn't have been able to keep it as a handy reference guide throughout the show. I use Notability to create handwritten thank you notes. I find it very hard to write cleanly by hand, but they mean so much more to the recipient. In Notability, I can easily erase mistakes, I can grab whole paragraphs and move them to make room. I use a line template because my normal handwriting kind of slants down the page and looks, awful. When I'm done with this, I can tap on the three-dot menu, choose Template Settings, switch to Plain, and now I can print, even in color, and it has all of the heart of a handwritten note because it really is a handwritten note. I'm a developer, and I use Notability to think. Let me open up the Content Manager, and I'm going to skip around the pages to show you what I mean. If I go to page 2, here's where I'm kind of laying out what I want my app's UI to look like. If I go down to page 5, in the pink, you can see what we call pseudocode. When trying to think up how a function is going to work, if I type code, it requires me to be precise and get all of the syntax correct. But I can write a fake function like what you see in pink here to think it out first. Now notice also how I change color often. This helps when I change subject, or I've been maybe away from it for a while and I want a fresh way to think. It really helps to think in Notability. One of my favorite uses for Notability is when I'm cross-stitching. Now bear with me, it actually works. I start by taking photos of the pattern, and then I crop them into pieces that I want to work on. I can drag around the pattern key you see overlaid here. Now I can pinch to zoom way in, and I can mark off the pattern with the pen as I'm working on it. While the iPad with pencil is ideal for this activity, if I'm away from my iPad, I can even use this on my iPhone with my finger. It's a wee bit harder to be precise, but it gets the job done. Knitting patterns are normally written as giant blocks of text with these arcane instructions about repeating from star to star and all these embedded loops of stitches that you have to do. I use my iPhone scanner function to grab the text, and then I reformat it in Notability to make more sense to me. I can make little tick marks when I've repeated sections as well. This is also useful because patterns can get bent and wrinkled and hard to read as you're working on them, but I always have a pristine copy of my patterns. When you play card games, especially away from home, do you scramble for a pen and paper? We play a lot of 5 crowns, and we use my iPad with Notability to keep score. Now that I think about it, I should be using a grid or at least a line template for this. People active in the Notability community are far more clever and definitely more artistic than I am, but hopefully these examples will give you some inspiration. In the second half of our Notability tutorial, we'll start by helping you organize your notes. Then we'll look at more advanced capabilities like recording audio synchronized with the notes you take while listening. We'll modify the toolbox, learn how to create math equations with handwriting, add stickers, import notes into Notability, and more. You can tell that I'm wild about Notability, and I can't wait to give you the second half of this tutorial. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with another ScreenCasts Online tutorial.